Let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's a company so powerful, so influential, that it literally controls more money than most countries in the world combined. I'm talking about Blackrock, and what I'm about to reveal will make you question everything you thought you knew about who really runs our world. Now, you might be thinking, come on, how powerful can one company really be? Well, let me put it into perspective for you. Blackrock manages over $10 trillion in assets. That's not billion with a B. We're talking trillion with a T. To put that into perspective, if Blackrock was a country, it would be the third largest economy in the world, right after the United States and China. Let me show you just how deep their influence goes. Take any major company you can think of. Go ahead, think of one. Chances are, Blackrock owns a significant portion of it. They're the largest shareholder in companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and even their supposed competitors like Vanguard and State Street. During the 2008 financial crisis, when the entire global economy was on the brink of collapse, who did the US government call? Not other banks, not economic advisors. They called Blackrock. Since then, they've only tightened their grip on global finance. What's fascinating is how they've stayed invisible to the average person. Everyone knows names like Amazon, Apple, or Google. But BlackRock? They've perfected the art of wielding enormous power while maintaining an incredibly low profile. And trust me, that's not by accident. Now, they're planning to expand their control in ways that you can't even imagine. They're positioning themselves to control entire markets, entire industries, and even influence government policies worldwide. Now, controlling this much money might seem impossible for any normal company, but BlackRock isn't using normal methods. In fact, they've created something that makes their power almost unlimited. A computer they call Aladdin. But Aladdin isn't just any computer system. This is quite literally the most powerful financial supercomputer the world has ever seen. And when I say powerful, I mean this thing processes more trades than the New York Stock Exchange, Nasdaq, and London Stock Exchange combined. Let that sink in for a moment. A single computer system, owned by a private company, has more influence over global markets than all major stock exchanges put together. Now, you might be thinking, okay, it's a powerful computer. So what? Well, here's where things get really interesting. Aladdin doesn't just process trades. It analyzes more data than any other system in the financial world. We're talking about millions of calculations every second, monitoring everything from stock prices to government policies, from social media trends to natural disasters. Anything that could possibly affect the financial markets. Aladdin is watching it, analyzing it, and making decisions based on it. Let me give you an example of how this works. Let's say there's a small change in government policy in, say, Singapore. Before most humans even have time to read about this change, Aladdin has already analyzed its potential impact on global markets, calculated how it might affect thousands of different investments, and started making trades to profit from this information. And remember, this is happening millions of times every single day. And it gets even more interesting when you look at what this means for the future. Because Aladdin isn't just getting more powerful, it's getting smarter. With every trade, every analysis, every decision, it's learning. Learning how markets work, learning how humans react, learning how to predict and control the flow of money around the world. Think about the implications of this for a moment. We're not just talking about a computer that can make trades faster than humans. We're talking about an AI system that's becoming the central nervous system of the global economy. A system that knows more about global finance than all the world's bankers combined, making decisions that affect the lives of billions of people. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all this is how little oversight there is. Remember, Aladdin isn't regulated like a bank or a stock exchange. It's a private system, owned by a private company, making decisions that affect the entire world's economy. But Aladdin's power isn't just about processing financial data. It's about how BlackRock uses this technology to shape their public image. And nowhere is this more evident than in their masterful manipulation of the ESG movement. You've probably heard a lot about ESG investing lately: environmental, social, and governance. It sounds great, right? Companies doing good for the world, protecting the environment, promoting social justice. And if you've been paying attention, you've probably heard BlackRock positioning themselves as the champions of this movement. But what I'm about to show you reveals something far more sinister beneath this green facade. Let's roll back to January 2020. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink makes this grand announcement about how they're putting sustainability at the center of their investment approach. He writes these dramatic letters to CEOs worldwide, talking about how climate change is reshaping finance. The mainstream media ate it up. Headlines everywhere praised BlackRock for being a leader in sustainable investing. But here's what they didn't tell you. While BlackRock was making all these public statements about fighting climate change, they were simultaneously remaining one of the world's largest investors in fossil fuels. We're not talking about small investments here. BlackRock and Vanguard are still the leading investors in coal. That's more than double what they claimed they would divest from their portfolio. And when environmental groups called them out on this, they simply pointed to their ESG funds and sustainable investment products. Now, you might be wondering, how do they get away with this? Well, this is where BlackRock's genius really shows. They've created this incredibly complex web of different investment products, each with its own set of rules and definitions of what counts as sustainable. It's like a shell game, but instead of hiding a ball, they're hiding billions of dollars of investments in polluting industries. The consequences of this deception go far beyond just misleading investors. Because of BlackRock's enormous size and influence, their actions set the standard for the entire investment industry. When they greenwash their investments, it gives cover for other companies to do the same. They're not just participating in the problem, they're institutionalizing it. And if you think this is just about environmental issues, think again. The same pattern repeats across all aspects of their ESG strategy: social justice, corporate governance, workers' rights. In each case, there's this huge gap between what BlackRock says publicly and what they actually do with their money and influence. But this is just one piece of their master plan. Wait until you hear about what they're doing with China. This is where the story takes a turn that would make even the most hardened conspiracy theorists do a double take. Except this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is all documented fact. Back in 2020, BlackRock became the first foreign-owned company allowed to operate a wholly owned mutual fund business in China. Now, if you know anything about China's financial system, you know this is absolutely unprecedented. The Chinese government is famously protective of their financial markets. They don't just let foreign companies walk in and start managing Chinese money. So the question we need to ask is, what did BlackRock promise to get this special treatment? Let me paint you a picture of what's happened since then. BlackRock has become one of the largest foreign investors in Chinese companies, including ones that are literally blacklisted by the US government for human rights violations. I'm talking about companies like Hikvision, which makes surveillance equipment used in detention camps in Xinjiang. Companies that are actively involved in what many governments have called cultural genocide. But it gets even more interesting when you look at the timing. Right when tensions between the US and China were at their highest, right when other companies were pulling out of China, BlackRock was pushing in. In fact, they were actively encouraging their clients to triple their investments in Chinese assets. While governments worldwide were warning about the risks of investing in China, BlackRock was telling everyone to go all in. But here's the real kicker. This isn't just about business. This is about political influence at the highest levels. When BlackRock invests in Chinese companies, they're not just buying shares, they're buying influence. They're gaining access to a system that's normally closed to outsiders, and they're using this access to shape policy on both sides of the Pacific. And all of this is happening with virtually no oversight, no accountability, and no real understanding of the long-term consequences. We're watching in real time as a private company helps reshape the global balance of power, all while making billions in profits from both sides. Now, everything we've talked about so far might seem a bit abstract. Global finance, government influence, AI systems. But what I'm about to show you hits much closer to home. Literally. Because BlackRock isn't just content with controlling financial markets. They're coming after the housing market. And their plans for real estate will change the way we live forever. They're not just buying houses. They're transforming the entire concept of home ownership. Here's how it works. First, BlackRock started buying up single-family homes in desirable neighborhoods. Not just a few homes here and there. We're talking about entire neighborhoods. They come in with all-cash offers, often 20 to 30% above asking price. How can regular home buyers compete with that? Simple answer. They can't. But that's just phase 1 of their plan. Phase 2 is where things get really interesting. Instead of selling these homes, BlackRock converts them into rental properties. But we're not talking about traditional landlord-tenant relationships here. They're creating what they call an institutional rental market. Sounds fancy, right? What it really means is that they're turning housing from a path to ownership into a permanent subscription service. They're partnering with major developers to build entire communities designed specifically for renting. They're creating a future where renting isn't just an option, it's the only option. Let me give you some numbers that will blow your mind. By 2030, BlackRock might control up to 40% of all available rental properties. They're not just participating in the market, they're becoming the market. And with their massive financial resources, they can literally set prices at whatever level they want. But it gets even more interesting when you look at their long-term strategy. BlackRock isn't just betting on rising home prices. They're actively creating conditions that ensure prices will rise. And they're using their influence over government policy to make this possible. Through their connections with local governments, they're influencing zoning laws, building regulations, even property tax policies. They're literally rewriting the rules of real estate to favor large institutional investors, meaning themselves. And if you think this is just about housing, think again. This is part of a larger trend where everything you once could own becomes something you have to continuously rent. From homes to cars to furniture, they're creating a world where ownership becomes a luxury reserved for the very wealthy, while everyone else becomes permanent renters in BlackRock's new feudal system. Now, you might be wondering, if BlackRock is doing all of these shady things, why haven't we heard more about it? Well, what I'm about to tell you explains exactly why. Because BlackRock's control of the media might be their most brilliant strategy of all, and they've perfected it to an art form. Let's start with the numbers, because they're absolutely mind-blowing. Together with their strategic partner Vanguard, BlackRock controls significant portions of every major media company in the world. We're talking about 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 13% of Comcast, which owns NBC, MSNBC, and CNBC, and 12% of Disney. But these numbers don't tell the whole story, not even close. Because here's the thing, when you control this much of every major media company, you don't just own shares, you have a seat at the table. You get to influence what stories get covered, what narratives get pushed, and more importantly, what doesn't get reported. Think about that for a moment. When one company has this much influence over all major media outlets, what does that mean for the free press? What does that mean for public information? But it gets even more interesting when you look at how they use this control. BlackRock isn't just preventing negative stories about themselves. They're actively shaping how the public understands finance, economics, and corporate power. They've created this incredible system where they can control both the message and the medium. They're not just playing the game, they're controlling how the game gets reported. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. When BlackRock makes a major move in the market, let's say buying up thousands of homes or investing billions in China, how does it get reported? Usually with dry, technical language that makes most people's eyes glaze over. No dramatic headlines, no investigative reports, no critical analysis. Just bland, corporate speak that hides the real implications of what's happening. And this control has become even more sophisticated. BlackRock isn't just influencing traditional media, they're reshaping the entire information landscape. Through their investments in tech companies, They have influence over social media platforms, search engines, and content recommendation systems. They're not just controlling what news gets reported, they're influencing how information flows through our entire society. But here's where it gets really disturbing. BlackRock isn't just using their media control to protect their own interests. They're using it to shape public opinion on a massive scale. Through their control of multiple media outlets, they can create what appears to be a consensus on important issues. When different news sources all present the same perspective, it seems like objective truth, even when it's actually serving BlackRock's interests. Think about the implications of this. When one company can influence how billions of people understand the world, what does that mean for public discourse? When they can shape both the financial markets and how those markets are reported on, what does that mean for transparency? What does that mean for accountability? And here's the really frightening part. They're doing all of this while maintaining this image of being just another boring financial company. They've mastered the art of being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere in the media landscape. They're not just controlling information, they're controlling how people think about economic power itself. The implications of this are staggering. We're watching the creation of a new kind of power, one that can control not just markets and politics, but the very way we understand reality. And if you think this is concerning, you're absolutely right. Because when one company has this much control over both the economy and how we perceive the economy, what hope do we have for genuine reform or accountability? So where does all of this leave us? What does it mean when one company controls not just our money, but our homes, our technology, our politics, and even our understanding of the world? The picture I've painted might seem frightening, and honestly, it should be. Because today, BlackRock isn't just a company anymore. It's become something entirely new in human history. Let me break down what this means for our future. In the world BlackRock is creating, traditional ideas about democracy, free markets, and individual freedom are becoming obsolete. When one company can control so many aspects of our lives, what does sovereignty even mean anymore? When they can influence everything from the price of your home to the information you see on your newsfeed, what does freedom really mean? But here's the really important part. This isn't inevitable. Yes, BlackRock has amassed unprecedented power. Yes, they've created systems of control that seem almost impossible to challenge. But remember this, their power ultimately depends on our acceptance of it. They need us to keep investing our money with them, to keep renting their homes, to keep consuming their approved media narratives. So share this video, spread this information. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to stay informed about these crucial issues.